One of the things that happens to me whenever I tap on a notification from my security system from SmartThings is it brings me right to the video that was just taken by the cameras around my home. This is an option that I've chosen in the SmartThings app inside of my smart home monitor, and it causes a recording to happen each and every time there's a security event. But when that notification comes up on my phone and I tap on it, what happens is the video never comes up, or at least not fast enough for me to actually see what happened during the event, because the recording has to go from the camera up to the Samsung cloud, and then it has to get downloaded to my phone. This process takes too long. Instead, what I have done is inside of the devices page, I have created a camera group. And what's really nice about this is I don't just choose my SmartThings devices, I can choose my Nest devices as well to include in this group. And you could choose from the other makers available, including Arlo and Ring. I have included that group in my favorites in the application, and that means that when I get a security notification, I don't go through that notification to review. I instead go into my SmartThings app, and it's on the front page to tap to look at all of my cameras. Hello Automators, thanks for tuning in again. I'm Brian from Automate Your Life, and today I'm going to take the frustration out of automation by helping you get more out of Samsung SmartThings. Today's video is part of a 5-part mini-series that we're creating for Samsung SmartThings and all of these little tips and tricks that you'll want to get more out of that system. But we're going to also include links down below, not just to the other parts of this series, but also to tutorial videos that will help you to finalize what it is we talk about on today's video. And topics will build on each other, or we'll be able to build up to more and more complex things as we go in this series. The first tip I gave you at the start of today's video is going to help you to get to your cameras very quickly, but you might still find yourself searching through this application if you have a lot of devices or you're not that familiar. And that is where the favorites page and some of the new features that Samsung gave us with this new application will really come into play. There are quick ways to organize that favorites page, and you can long hold press on any element and drag it around, and that will help you to organize things in a way that makes sense to you. When you long hold press on those items, you can of course remove any items from your favorites page, but that would take you a long time to get rid of a ton of different elements. So one of those little tricks is that top right in the application, you can hit those 3 little dots and go into edit your favorites, and then you can get rid of a ton all at once. The one thing you can't do on this page is get anything moved above the scenes, but you could remove all of those scenes from your favorites, and you can drag the scenes around in between that little section so you can organize your scenes. Plus, a lot of people don't know that you can now change the icon that's associated with that scene and make it look more like it should. When I was showing that group creation for cameras in the app, there was another option actually on the devices page. That is for lighting groups, and I really love to create those lighting groups and put them on the favorites page again, because it's a quick way to see if any lights are on within a group and to turn them on and off quickly when I enter the app. However, as you're creating a lighting group, you might notice that both switch and outlets are down below underneath the light bulbs that you have in your home. And while there's a lot of different devices within that, it doesn't cover everything in your smart home. And so there's another type of switch that we can create that will help us to group anything in our smart home. Many of you will have access to SmartThings Labs, which is in your list of smart apps that you can add. If it's not there, you're in a country like here in Canada where they haven't released that capability yet. Well, in that case, you might have to use the IDE, or you might have a virtual device creator smart app. And if you have that smart app, then you don't need me to guide you in how to create a virtual switch. So I'm going to direct you within the IDE. This is at account.smartthings.com, and you will log in, and then you'll have to go to the devices tab to find whatever virtual switch you've created. If you haven't created one, well then click on create new device, and you will choose the device type that you see on screen. Now, the basic type of virtual switch that you create with SmartThings Labs or that you create with that Smart app should show up in the list of devices that you can include in those lighting groups. But just so you know, one of the little tricks here within the list of device types is that there's a whole set of different simulated devices or different types of virtual devices that you can create and therefore mirror what it is you're trying to mirror from another system or just inside of Samsung SmartThings. That little feature of choosing the device type becomes really useful later in the series, so just keep that in your head for right now. And let me show you how this can simplify looking at your SmartThings and your smart home in general from that security perspective. Because one of the things that I struggle with within this whole setup is seeing that one thing that tells me my home is secured, or let's call it in a lockdown state. So if you have 3 smart home locks, you can't group those. You've got to look at them all individually. You could, in some cases, group your smart home cameras. You can't have one look at all of your door and window or contact sensors to see that they're all closed, and you don't have a single view into all of your leak sensors to know that they are dry. To do this, we can create a virtual switch called Home Secured, and we can favorite that device so it's showing up on our home page. This will also allow us to check on it in different ways that I'm going to share with you as we go through the series. So we can create an automation that will drive this virtual switch on, and that would be from all of the different devices that we just talked about. What you might want to do here, and what you'll probably have to do, is to split things up and create separate automations for different device types and then name them appropriately. This will also help with troubleshooting later. So an example of that is maybe you want to create a virtual switch that's called All Door Locks Locked, and that one could be driven by your 3 door locks, all showing a locked status. But to say that our home is secured, we would need all of those door locks locked, and we would need all of our smart home cameras to be turned on, and we would need to make sure that all the doors are closed and the windows are closed, and we would need to make sure that the leak sensors are dry, and we might even want to check on battery statuses. This is an and statement, and it's one of those little tricks inside of automations that if you don't know how to use it, you've probably never used it, but it's really critical in this case. To say that the home is not secured, we have to create a second automation, and this one will check if any of the door locks are unlocked, or it will check if any of the doors are opened, or it'll check if any of the leak sensors are wet, or it'll check if any of the cameras are turned off. This is an or statement, and it's the other type of automation or the other type of checks that you can do to trigger an automation. Either way, what you have at the end of this, whether you layer it with a couple of sets of virtual switches, what you have is one single item on your favorites page that tells you whether or not your home is secured. The only thing you'll have to make sure of is that you're not pressing that button and you're letting the automations take care of that. I know that this was incredibly complicated, and so some of you are going to be lost, so I'm going to explain this in more detail. With each component of your home security that you'd like to track separately, what you'll be doing is creating 2 automations and 1 virtual switch. Now, what I've created is Doors All Locked. That is a virtual switch, and it will be turned on. You can see in this automation, which is checking all of my different door locks, and it's checking if they're locked. Now, you might also have a condition with each of your door locks that says something like it's closed. So you might want to check if door lock 1 is closed and door lock 1 is locked. And so you might have that complication to your first automation. Then you will create a second automation, and you'll notice the difference between the 2 automations is that the and sign is being used in automation 1 when we're turning on the status because we're saying all of these things have occurred. But in automation 2, if any of our door locks become unlocked, then we're turning off Doors All Locked. The next component is, of course, our doors and windows. And I'm just using the word sensor 1 is closed and sensor 2 is closed and sensor 3. And then I'm turning on doors all closed. Now you might want to create a separate status called windows all closed. You can see we're really just doing the exact same automation, and as we move into leak sensors, it's exactly the same. The difference here is we're checking if the leak sensors are dry individually or they are wet, and that would turn our status of leak sensors all dry on and off. Finally, I'm checking my smart cameras to see if they're on or off, and this tells me at the end of the night, all of my smart cameras are ready. You might want to check things like battery statuses, or you might want to check some other types of security devices. But here's what I do at the end of all of this. I have two final automations, and my first one is doors all locked is on, and doors all closed is on, and leak sensors all dry is on, and smart cameras ready is on. This gives me the then component of my automation, which says my smart home is secured. Now we do need the reverse again, and this is again where we're going to use that or component. So doors all locked is off, or all of the other statuses. So we're just checking them, and if any one of those turn off, then our smart home is not secured, and that gives us that single tile on our home page if we just favorite that status of smart home secured. And speaking of security, the cameras within Samsung SmartThings are one of those specialized device types that we have access to, and you can do some pretty great things. That is, if you give me a couple more minutes. The smart home monitor allows you, for any of your connected SmartThings cameras, to take a recording anytime there is an event. It doesn't matter if it's a security event or a smoke or a water event. You're going to be able to set which cameras you'd like to take recordings. Of course, those recordings weren't very useful in our first tip today, but they are very useful for referring to later when you have an event. However, there's a configuration at the bottom of that smart home monitor that a lot of people miss, and this allows you to get an image with the notification that you get from that system. This, coupled with the ability to create audio notifications right in the smart home monitor, allows you to get a lot of different notification types very quickly. What's great is you'll get multiple images from multiple cameras in that notification, and actually when you finally do get to the review screen, you will be able to review all of those notifications and all of the footage from all of your cameras. But there are a lot of other reasons that you'll want to get an image or to take a recording with one of your cameras. So it's important to note that within automations, you can actually choose to get a notification with an image from any of your cameras sent to any of the individuals in your smart home. Plus, there's an action for taking a recording at any time with any automation. One of the things that I found with having a siren in my home is that that response is a little too powerful, and while it's very loud and it might scare people away, I think I can do the job with other types of notifications, and that's where I just haven't enjoyed the base siren device type and the smart home monitor's response. Instead, what I like to do is create automations that use custom audio notifications. You can do it out of Sonos speakers, and you can do it even out of the Galaxy Home Mini if you've managed to find one of those. There's a set of speakers that you can now just push out of an automation, a custom audio notification in a couple of different voices. I also have a multi-siren from Zoos, which can basically put out anything, and I can even record wave files and upload them to that device. But that device is pretty complicated, and there's a tutorial video for that you can check out below. A door sensor can become a window sensor, but that doesn't mean that you're just sensing when the window is physically left open. Instead, you can turn it into a full security device if you're worried that someone might break a window by having one part on the window and one part on the window frame. Easily the best way to know if a garage door is being opened is this little trick where you install a hinge on your garage door and then you leave one side able to move as the door goes up. This is just a device type, but these sensitive strips are some of the skinniest devices that you'll find in terms of a contact sensor, and they are able to sense even between my fridge door and the actual interior of the fridge. This can work with patio doors as well, in between the door jamb and your door. These strips tend to work very well on the inside of any window frame as well, to kind of hide that there's actually a sensor there. The other component is that they have what's called the drip sensor, and because this is so skinny, it can actually hide underneath a lot of your appliances and work very well as a leak sensor for a long time because they have a very long battery life. This is one of my favorite methods though, if you don't want to buy those specialized kinds of sensors. And you can see I'm just sticking this towards the top of my door, and I'm going to put the second half of the contact sensor just above it, and so I have lots of room at this point in the door and it's well hidden. As the door moves, obviously the two sensors split apart and we can see the open-closed status. Another idea for door sensors or contact sensors is if you're trying to make sure that a valuable doesn't get stolen, you can actually stick part of a door sensor on the device physically and then the other half on the surface it's sitting on, and this should let you know if that device or that valuable ever moves. This works especially well for items like TVs, and obviously that works if you're trying to keep kids away from picking something up too. It might even be a great idea for those liquor bottles if you have teens. One of my favorite tricks overall though is not to use the 3M tape that you get, and the reason I don't use that 3M tape is it actually does usually ruin your wall or your paint on your wall. And so I actually use this double-sided clear tape that I'll have a link for down below, and I use a very, very small amount and my sensors will all stay, but I can get that tape off. In a lot of cases, I use that same tape with my motion sensors, and that allows me to affix them anywhere, but many sensors come with magnets, and therefore you can stick them just about anywhere. But if you can't, one of the locations I like to hide motion sensors is just underneath your railing on your stairs, and this allows you to tuck them away and not have them visible. One of the biggest gaps, or one of the biggest problems that people will have with SmartThings and the whole smart home monitor system is presence sensing. And the reason that happens is different than many people assume, but what happens is that you won't necessarily get that presence sensing to trigger an automation or to send you the reminder from the smart home monitor that says, hey, it's time to arm your system, or when you return, it's time to disarm your system. So a lot of people walk into their homes with the system still armed, or they'll leave and forget to arm their system entirely. What's funny about presence sensing is that a lot of people blame it on Samsung, but there's only really one setting within SmartThings that you can adjust. Now, this is inside of the IDE, and you can adjust the presence sensor timeout from 2 minutes up, but it's already set on that 2 minutes. In a lot of cases, it's actually your cell phone provider, and I know this because I've compared a lot of services that are using this same sort of geolocation or presence sensing, and what they're all doing is triggering at exactly the same time. So it's a setup that's the same across, and it's more likely your cell provider that's causing you this issue. The good news is I have a couple of solutions for this little issue, so stick with me here. Now, the first layer is I just actually create a couple of automations. The first automation arms the system when everyone leaves the home, and the second automation disarms the system when anyone returns home. This often has my system turning off as I drive up the driveway because that presence sensing will usually trigger within that amount of time. So it usually works. One thing you might note in those automations is when I arrive, I'm instantly turning off that system, but I'm giving everyone a little bit of extra time when they leave the home to have that system armed. This is to stop people who maybe have to run in real quickly when they forget something or have to turn around and come back in. I'll let you decide how long you want to leave it for, but this just stops a few of those accidental triggers. For a little bit now, iPhone users have struggled more with presence sensing with SmartThings, and there are a number of things that you can check, including your own privacy settings on the iPhone to make sure that your SmartThings app always has the ability to check your location. Plus, you have to make sure that in SmartThings, you have turned on the ability to get location from your phone. But inside of the IDE, we can go to My Locations and then choose to list our devices. And if you're seeing any of your mobile devices listed as mobile presence instead of a placeholder type of device, well, then you have a problem. And I'm going to refer you to a great guide that has been put together to fix this issue. That link is down below. Now this isn't perfect because it's still using that presence sensing capability or geolocation on the different smartphones in your home, and you might have one that's not quite working right. That's okay. I have a different solution for you, and it is in the video that's up on screen, which is part 2 of our series here on those hidden tips and tricks with Samsung SmartThings. So go check that out, and otherwise, thanks for watching today, and of course, don't hate, automate.